Hi, everyone. Welcome to Going D1 Real Recruiting Stories. Today is an episode 2, and we are discussing uh, recruiting from a parent's perspective, from my perspective, um, decisions that we made as a family for our sons to get opportunities for D1 athletic programs for college. And um, I'm joined by my son, Gunnar Groen, who
Hello
will
again.
be hi, who will be asking some questions. But first, let me just give you a brief um, background on myself. So I grew up in Chicago, played a few different sports, but primarily basketball. I'm tall and was able to um, use my height and athleticism to play through college, played Division III, was a reasonable college player, and had some, I guess, insights afterwards that there's more to my potential than I realized in college. Also, was pretty young when I graduated. Was 20, basically 21, my last year of school, and so um, a lot of those parts of my story influenced kind of the way I viewed recruiting for my sons as they matured. So
Oh,
we go ahead.
good. No, just saying. Well, number one, I didn't know that you were almost 21 when you graduated college because that's how old I was when I was a sophomore in college. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so the after college ended up moving, spent some time in Europe where my oldest son Gunnar was born, and then moved to suburban New York City in Connecticut, where my second and third sons were born, and had a great community in Connecticut, um, but felt like the the Connecticut recruiting scene for I guess higher level sports was pretty limited,
Yeah.
and so two events actually shaped it for me. Um,
It,
in
they shaped,
in
they shaped what? Like your perspective on recruiting in Connecticut?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So two events shaped the recruiting in Connecticut perspective, and one of them was uh, Gunnar going to uh, Houston to work out at the baseball ranch,
Mhm.
which we spoke about in to some extent in episode 1. And I was
Go give
fairly
a go give a
sorry.
listen. Go check out
Yep.
episode one, everybody.
Exactly. So I was fairly shocked at how far behind Gunnar was from a developmental perspective from people in Texas and California and Florida, warm states where you could practice year round. And the other event was actually I took my second son, Bowden, to FBU, which is Football University, which I don't know if you have any football players out there, but it's similar to, I guess, showcases for younger baseball players, or um, younger athletes competing to display different skills or talents in a particular sport. And in middle school, we took him to that, and I had a long conversation about the talent pool that he was competing against, and essentially determined that unless he was one of the better players in the state in high school, it would be very difficult to get a Division I offer in football from our town and in the state of Connecticut. So those were kind of both formative experiences for me, and also, had experience in growing up outside of Chicago, just how limited the recruiting was for for that area in terms of any kind of national level.
Yeah.
So,
Do you
anyways,
go ahead. Go ahead.
that's kind of the recap, and then obviously we started after, I guess, trying to make Connecticut work for quite a while. We decided to move to Texas, so
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. Do you think I guess a question I have for you is how, you know what? I guess I could phrase it as how much better do you think Bowden and I got um at our respective sports after we moved to Texas? Like what was sort of the jump that you saw in both of us? I know he was a little bit younger and he's definitely still developing when we were in Texas, but I feel like at least from my perspective, I know I made a big jump and I really feel like he made a big jump too. So yeah, what did you see from your end of it after we moved to Texas and spent a little time there?
so. Number one, I think for both of you, it was quite clear that your ability to practice baseball and football were amplified at least 100%, maybe 200% in terms of your opportunity
Yeah,
for competition, both on a competitive level, but also just on a time level.
yeah,
And I think for football in particular, for Bowden, the level of seriousness and competition starts at a younger age in Texas than it does in the
mm, sure.
let's just say suburban New York City. And so he had an edge with that. You had an edge in terms of being able to throw year round and being able to really push yourself physically. Um, and I think one of the biggest additions or the biggest added value components to the move was both of you were able to compete against people at a potentially higher level. And
Definitely, I
I,
would say definitely at a higher level.
yeah, and so I think one of the issues was that everyone around you had been practicing for, let's call it 5 years more than each of you,
Yeah,
and were more skilled and more trained. But also the athleticism and sort of focal point in other areas away from New York City towards athletic development was greater. So the talent pool, while it may not be significantly higher, the skill level was much higher, and the ability to compete was much higher.
right.
So,
And
for you, go ahead.
yeah, and so well, I guess just taking it back to Connecticut after that, like what I guess looking back on it after we've been in California, in Texas, and in Connecticut, how like what what did you feel like outside of like weather and time available to practice, what did you feel like we didn't have in Connecticut in terms of the competition and like the talent that we were able to be exposed to in Texas and California?
Well, I don't know why I just thought of this, but I thought about I had this a travel baseball story where we were in central Connecticut somewhere. I don't even remember the name of the team or anything really about it, other than your team won, and you know they were pretty good. Your team was pretty good, but
Yeah,
nothing crazy.
yeah,
And we were in some you know town where everyone was obviously very into baseball and was extremely.
I don't even know if I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it was one of these travel games, and we beat this team, and we were walking away. You guys were probably like 9 years old or something, And this coach, after you won, stood up and was just like berating all these kids and
Oh,
screaming at
no.
them, and like going off on them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, we're
Jeez.
like in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut, and this guy's like, you're not going to get us to the World Series like this. And how are we going to get to little league World Series when you're playing like this and all this stuff? And so, while there was definitely an appetite for competition, I felt like just the ability, the capacity to train year round is so
Yeah.
limited because you have to do it inside.
Yeah.
That was something.
I guess also going off of that, I have a follow-up question. What if you had to, and we haven't I don't feel like we've talked about this before, but like in terms of coaching and like the organizations that we were playing as a part of, do you feel like there was a big difference in the actual coaching that we received on teams in Connecticut versus Texas or California?
Well, uh, in Connecticut, you did have one coach that was
Yeah.
very, very good,
Yeah.
and he ended up being a minor league scout. Um, and but most of the time, you were coached by friends that played Division III football and things like that. Like they
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
they weren't bad. I mean,
No.
I they were similar to me with more baseball knowledge. They were amateur athletes. And then your first travel team in Texas, you were coached by a number 1 pick in
Right.
a draft in the
Yeah.
'90s or
Yeah.
'80s, and he just had such a high baseball IQ that it's hard to even compare to that.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I noticed about being in both Texas and Southern California is pro athletes love to settle in nice areas, and so in both of these areas, I felt like there was a higher density of pro athletes, and that breeds a whole different sort of, I guess, awareness and competitiveness to rise to that level. Where, I think in suburban New York, everybody's trying to be
Yeah.
a marketing guru or a banking guru or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Or
to,
going to Ivy Leagues to study and not going to college to play sports.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, or going to Ivy League, playing sports to get into an Ivy League
Right.
rather than
Right.
going to
And Ivy League
college to
play
play.
sports. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Interesting. So, okay. Yeah. And so then, I mean, I think one thing that I remember from Texas that I didn't really know much about, but that I'm kind of interested to hear about is Bowden's experience with 7-on-7 football, because I remember in the off seasons when it wasn't school football time, he was playing 7-on-7 football and just kind of improving his athleticism in that way. What do you feel like that made a big difference for him? What changes did you see in him from playing that? What do you think that kind of off season competition and fitness did for him?
Well, he excelled in basketball as well, and basketball was um, a great sport for fitness and overall athleticism. You can't be out of shape. You can't be slow. You got to be aggressive, like all things that translate well into football.
Right.
And so for him, playing 7-on-7 and basketball, he really was able to increase his athleticism and increase the competitiveness of his benchmark for that athleticism.
Right.
And so, one of the things that really happened to him was, he, rather than measuring himself against, the average person was smaller in Connecticut, less athletic, and much lighter too. Like that
Sure.
was one of the things that I think for football he really
Mhm.
had, he had a great time because he was like just as fast or faster and twice as heavy, and so he had lots of fun. Like, football in Connecticut, and then he got to Texas, and he's like, "Oh wow, these kids are bigger." And so for him, the 7-on-7 and basketball, I would say, really helped him to increase his athleticism, his agility, his speed, and also knowledge of the game. One of the things that happens if you're playing 7-on-7 um, in the off seasons is you just learn so much more, both defensively and offensively. And so, unless you're a nose tackle or a um, O line O lineman,
Mhm.
playing 7-on-7 helps you to learn, you know, coverage, edge rushing, route running.
Yeah.
For a quarterback, it's really helpful. All
The-
those things. So just a huge body of knowledge in terms of what he was gaining by being in that environment.
Yeah.
Not to mention the same
Yeah.
uh, competitiveness level. And
Yeah.
so, and the other thing too is,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think that, there have been a couple times since I've been, uh, at least since I started in college, where I think that, or I've looked back and thought that I wish that I had played more sports for longer in my athletic career through high school. Because for me, I stopped playing. When did I stop playing like, I don't think I played basketball like for a school competitively in high school. I don't think I played it in high school, right? Yeah. I
No,
did.
you stopped in middle school.
Yeah, I stopped in middle school, and then everything became baseball in high school. And looking back on it and seeing sort of how it worked for Bowdoin and how it's going for Torsten now, who's doing football, basketball, all sorts of stuff. I do think that that's one thing that I wished I had done differently was played at least one other sport through high school, because for lots of college coaches that's kind of a bonus, or like that's another sort of item on your resume when you're trying to get a scholarship, is that if you play multiple sports, then it means that you're a little bit more of an athlete. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely something that I wish I had done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I've pushed all of you guys to do that. You were less receptive to my pushing towards that goal, but it all worked out. It was
Yeah,
fine that you
yeah, yeah.
didn't.
I mean, I knew
Um,
football wasn't going to be it for me. Football, I got the idea of football out of my head really early. So basketball,
yes, you did.
basketball was really the only other way I could have gone. But that
Yeah.
that seemed like a whole lot of running for me, for my taste. So that's why I'm a
Yeah.
pitcher.
Yes. Yes. That was an uphill battle to young Gunner, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So one of the other things too, I think, with both of you, the culture around Texas football and somewhat around Texas baseball was just ridiculous. Like the Texas football culture is very real. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing like it when you're rolling in, you're a sophomore, junior in high school, and you're being paraded around like a king of the world, in a small town or even
Friday Night Lights.
even a city. It's kind of surreal.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Um,
I think also one thing, at least from my experience in baseball, and obviously baseball's, people care about it in Texas, but it's nowhere close to football. I mean, our baseball stadium was like behind and underneath the football stadium at school, so
Yeah, yeah.
That was a very visual representation of the school's priorities.
It's very clear.
Yeah, but uh, when it comes to the competition aspect of it, I remember playing preseason games for our baseball team, and we were playing one team, and someone was like, "Oh my gosh, like this guy throws like 95 to 97, and like he's going to be drafted in the first round after he graduates this year," as opposed to in Connecticut where we were throwing bullpens in the gymnasium because it was too cold outside, and there were like two kids out of the entire team that could like touch 90 miles an hour, and one of them was like mainly an outfielder, and he just had an arm, and he got drafted in like something like the 18th round or something by the Mets because it's
He knew
because
he knew the owner.
he had connections to the Mets. And I was like, wow, these are very different situations that I finding myself in here. So it
Yeah.
was, when you hear about those things, and then I'm sure there were people that Bowden and you guys heard about in Texas, in the Texas high school football scene, but like when you hear about those things, it starts making it a little bit more real.
Well, I remember, I don't know if you remember Garrett Wilson, but
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson's a Jets receiver now,
Yeah.
and he he played. Bowden actually did not compete against him, but they he was at Lake Travis while
Mhm.
you guys were at Westlake, and
Okay.
and he I'm trying to remember Bowden. I think Bowden was playing JV basketball, and he went to a varsity basketball game, and Garrett Wilson was like throwing down slams and doing all this stuff, and he's like, "Man, this guy's definitely on a different plane than the rest of us here." And sure enough, as he's a Jets wide receiver, it all
Yeah.
worked out for him.
Yeah. I think I guess a question that I have for you is when it came to that and it came to uh, the differences in where we were versus where we needed to be, and those that chasm became a little bit more clear. What did you find was a good way uh, to sort of help us bridge that gap, like as a parent, parenting your child, and what things worked for you to help us get over that hump, and what things didn't work? What did you learn from all of that?
Well, one of the interesting lessons I learned that I still struggle to implement was the corrective teaching, if you will. So when you were in middle school, I used to get so pissed watching baseball games because I'm like, why does he think a walk is okay? And I remember when you were young, just yelling at you after the game, and I'm sure you have many fun fond memories of car rides home, as most kids do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I started. I
Blocking it out.
Well, no, not blocking it out, but I may or may not have fabricated my stats for games on the car ride home so that they were a little bit less severe.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I think all of you guys have twisted a little bit or a lot, so they don't have to. You guys don't have to have the crazy car ride. So
But yeah,
at some
corrective.
point, yeah, at some point I was like, all right, well, just yelling at somebody right after the game, doesn't really do anything. And so I started changing my approach to parenting in terms of uh, make notes, mental notes, try to be encouraging after the game, and then prior to the next game, kind of talk about some things that maybe you guys could work on, or
I I do
objectives within that.
I do remember there was a transition period where you stopped yelling at me like right after the game on the car ride home, but then like like as soon as you had the chance the next day, we would go over it the next day, and then eventually it started transitioning to before the next game. So
Yeah, so
yeah,
there you go.
yeah, exactly. It moved along the spectrum.
Yeah. So I guess I was learning, as a parent, I think no one ever gives you the handbook of this is what's going to work. And I
Especially with youth
guess,
sports.
yeah. And I think one of the things I grew up with coaches that would get so, so mad and, go off on me. And it was actually effective during the game for me. And so I may have implemented that more than I needed to. It was totally ineffective with you, but with Bowden and Torsten, they do get fired up,
Yeah,
and so
I was gonna say
it's
we have different temperaments, hence the I think the different sports we play and also the different parenting styles that are required.
yeah, yeah, and so I mean, I think that's the thing about being a parent is it's got to be dynamic. Similar to coaching. Coaching, good coaches are dynamic and
Mhm.
have different motivational techniques with everyone and teach differently. And so you're kind of a coach, but really you're a supporter and trying to fill in where the coaches are either too busy or not
Not there.
uh, not focused on it. And I think as a parent, I would say that you know my goal was certainly to create opportunities for you guys, and the only way to create those opportunities that I could really understand was to move to an environment where you were, I guess, enveloped in it, or
Kind of
you
forced
know
to get better.
living and breathing it.
Yeah.
Because I felt like where we grew up in Connecticut, or where you grew up in Connecticut, was a really comfortable existence, and it bred sort of a sense of, hey, I'm just going to ride the train as long as
Yeah.
I can, and then all of a sudden I'll be done with school, and
Yeah.
I'll go to college and do something. And it just was a probably too comfortable.
Yeah.
And I felt like both of you kind of stood out without even trying, which
Really.
I think at many times, I growing up, I felt like I was uh, I was good enough to excel without practicing, which is not a good thing. And so I was trying to avoid that as a parent, putting you in environments where you could excel
Right.
without working hard. And
Yeah.
so that was part of it, for me, anyways, in
Yeah.
terms of wanted you guys to have a better environment that drove you to success, and maximize your potential.
Right.
So
And then I think another place we could go was kind of like what I guess what did it look like for you and for mom, or for our parents when we were in Texas and we were all of a sudden competing with these athletes that were much better than they were in Connecticut. Like how did that how did that make you guys feel? Were you nervous? Were you confident in us? Were you obviously you guys were supportive, but like what kind of different what kind of different emotions and feelings and strategies did you guys go through to kind of help us get to the place where we needed to be?
So I think number one, I always had tremendous confidence in you and Bowden and Torsten. And number two, I always felt that you would develop slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's always been
developed
the case.
slowly over time, and as I was, what's that?
I said that has been very true for me.
Yeah, and so I realized at the age of 21, when I was done with my playing career, that I was just kind of starting on my athletic journey, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so mom really was eager to make sure you guys started school late from a academic perspective and a developmental perspective.
Right.
And I think that I always felt like that was something as well that I felt was counterproductive in sports was that I was younger, and if anything, if I'd been 2 years older graduating from college, I would have had a much different experience and different opportunity set.
Right.
And so watching you guys compete in a bigger pool or more competitive pool, I always felt like I always felt that you were better than the kids that were playing, and
That's
I
great
always
that
felt
you
the
felt that way
same for
because
both.
I could
What's
say,
that?
I said that's great that you felt that way because I very rarely felt that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so you just were overlooked by coaches, similar to Bowden, and I think uh, it's a it's a problem. Coaches always go with whoever's going to win at the moment,
Mhm.
and if you're going to develop more slowly over time, it's a ongoing battle. And I remember there was this kid on your baseball team that was 5'7" and 110 pounds or something, and he was just the lights out pitcher in high school at a high level high school program. But the reality was he was tiny and didn't throw that hard,
Yeah.
and he was
I mean,
he was awesome.
yeah, I remember him like he just threw more strikes than anyone else, and that was really all it was.
Yeah, and so the coach loved it, right? And so the coach played him all the time, and I'm like, this is insanity. Like, here, this kid's doing great. I don't put him down, but at the end of the day, this is it, man. He's not going anywhere,
Mhm.
because he's not. And it's not a height thing. It was the combination of factors where he just wasn't throwing that hard, and the different things he was doing
Yeah,
were effective in high school, but weren't going to be effective in college or beyond.
yeah,
And so I always viewed the three of you that your apex is probably in your 20s. And so if you recall, I do have a phrase
yeah. I'm
that
very
I
familiar.
often used on you,
Yeah,
which was, what was it?
it was that you can't say, or you're not allowed to say I can't do anything until I'm 25.
Right, right. So I mean, that was part of my view of the whole athletic journey, was that most people quit uh, too early because they're discouraged. Their coaches choose the kid that's the best in the moment for obvious reasons, and they choose winning over development. And there's a it's hard to see that from a parenting perspective. It's hard to watch, and if you don't have confidence in your kids,
Right.
you're not gonna make it. And that was always one of the things for me. I always felt like you and Bowden and Thorsten would end up having a much better career than everyone around you if you continued to push and improve and get stronger and get
Stick with
more
it.
mature. Yeah,
Stick with it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's something that I've definitely noticed. Has just been that I've played with so many talented baseball players like over my years, and it feels like lots of them who I see now on social media who are moving on from their athletic careers. So many of them they I know that the stuff that they do could compete in indie ball, and then if it can compete in indie ball, then you could compete in the minor leagues, and it could keep going. But it really does feel like some people they just don't feel like sticking with it. They don't feel like it's worth it to just keep going. And I've found that, or at least I feel like in my mind, like my ability to just continue and just keep taking the next step has rewarded me.
yeah. I think perseverance is critical, and I've actually spoken to a number of um, ex probably more baseball ex pro baseball players. A lot of them would attribute perseverance and desire over talent.
Yeah.
to getting to the majors because there are enough talented people out there. It's just a matter of trying to figure out who's got the mental capability to get to that level. You know,
Mhm.
that was always one of the things, and you guys always joke about how I love Michael Jordan, but one of the things about Michael Jordan that I think stands out to me is that he was physically gifted, but not more so
Yeah.
than tons of other guys.
Yeah.
It was more of his mentality and his ability and his
When.
desire to compete and win. And he was going to not only beat you, but beat you, take your lunch from you, take everything from you,
Mm.
because he wanted it more than you did. And I think at the end of the day, that is what separates a great career from a great talent, you know?
Mm.
So, I mean, there's plenty of guys that have the talent. It's who has the desire, the competitiveness, the perseverance, all those things.
Yeah, for sure. I think another part, you've talked a bunch about how we've moved from Connecticut to Texas to California. What, for I guess parents who are considering it, people who have seen other people do it, like what I guess do you have any advice? What are some of the biggest challenges of doing it, and sort of how were you able to find success in the actual move and going through that?
So, fortunately or unfortunately, there's been flexibility both with work um, and kind of the clients that I have. It was more wasn't remote work, but I found that I was able to have the flexibility to move from city to city. Uh, and at the end of the day, you know, there are probably ways to solve that for everyone. One of our one of our focuses has always been academics, and so we were always looking for schools, both public and private, that would give you, the three of you, a great academic education as well as athletic opportunity. And so, you know, when we looked at making moves, one of the primary factors was the academics and what kind of, you know, first public schools, what kind of public schools were available and what they looked like. That was one of the reasons that we moved to the area we moved to in Texas, was that
Hmm.
the public school was a probably top 10 in the country public school. So,
I think it was ranked like number three in the or up. I think it was top five in the country.
right. So for us, I felt like there was huge value in the academic athletic combination. You'd get
Hmm.
tremendous athletic exposure and you could excel academically, which, you know, for sports, I think is a huge advantage, great advantage for the recruiting process and getting a D1 offer, is having that academic feather in your cap so that
As I also
the
mentioned in episode one. Which,
yes, yes, you did. So, anyways, we figured it out. It's disruptive. It you know, it changes your extended family relationships. It changes your friend relationships.
Mhm.
We've had a variety of friends. I would say most, or not most, but I would, I guess half of the friends we had in Connecticut have either moved away to
Mm,
the Carolinas or Florida or
right.
California, and so there is a level of movement that occurs naturally, anyways. So, you know, holding on to one particular neighborhood, unless you grew up in it and your family lives there, it's never it's
Well,
always going to be dynamic.
yeah. And in terms of like dealing with us and the family, like how did you find those moves with the family? Because I know I was kind of upset about the Texas one because I didn't understand it at the time. How do
You
you?
You were very upset.
Yeah, I was not happy, but
Yep. So you were very upset. Bowden has been much more excited about the moves. One of the one of the things about Bowden is he probably likes adventure and change more than you
yeah,
did as a kid.
yeah,
And he had gone to a new school, for middle school, and it was, I think, a bit scary for him, but he also was excited because the he wanted Friday Night Lights. I mean,
yeah,
it's an exciting
yeah,
kind of adventure for him. And Torsten, has I think embraced the moves as well. Not to the same level that perhaps Bowden did, but he's been very excited about it.
mhm.
And you were somewhat unique because your friend group was
I was gonna
very
say
low.
I was very attached in Connecticut.
Yeah, you had a good group of friends in the neighborhood, and Bowden didn't have that. Torsten didn't have that.
Yeah,
They were more kind of at free agent. They were free agents at school, and friends with everybody, whatever.
yeah,
So it was a little bit less painful. And those catalysts, for Bowden and well, for both of them, have been also athletically driven
mhm,
or and opportunity driven for them. I just don't think I probably didn't explain it well enough to you at the time. What
right,
the opportunity was for you,
yeah.
and
What the stakes
I
were
also
as well. Yeah,
sorry.
what the stakes were as well down the line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a tough conversation because it's
Yeah,
hard to
school.
understand, really.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then I guess once we got out to, or once you guys got out to California, I was already in college, but when you guys got out to California, Bowden started playing football in California, and he went through a pretty significant injury. Uh, from your perspective, I know kind of how he felt a little bit, but I was at school, so it was hard for me to understand it. How did you guys deal with that? How did you support him? What was going through that whole experience like?
well, you were very blessed or fortunate to not have material injury that ended the season. Particularly in high school, I think high school is a hard time to get injured.
Hmm.
Um, Bowden had a knee injury in high school, and ended up kind of missing. Well, not kind of. He missed his
Yeah,
sophomore year, uh, which had a material outcome. He, for many football players, sophomore year and also junior year are very important
hmm,
for recruiting for football. They are they're important for baseball and basketball. They're sports, but I think there's much more flexibility to kind of have
yeah,
workarounds in
yeah,
other sports. Football is a very school driven and kind of out of your control to some extent. It was, I wish I could say it didn't bother me. It was pretty upsetting when he was injured, and um, it was a very difficult time
yeah,
as a parent, and I think it was really hard for him. I don't, my perspective was probably too myopic in terms of I didn't understand how common injuries really are.
mm, yeah,
And so I didn't have enough experience with that whole
yeah,
component. As I've been around you guys and just higher level sports, you realize that everyone gets injured. It's just a matter of
yeah,
time and when and
yeah,
how severely and how often. And so it's really the path, you know, you had it in college to some extent. It kind of shut down a season for you. And, you know, it's a it's a part of sports that you can't ignore or control,
yeah,
And so
yeah,
for me, it was very, very distressing because he was doing so well in Texas, and
Right.
looks like he would have been starting D end defensive end on a state championship team, in his sophomore year, and
Yeah.
it would have kind of teed up, a full ride to Texas or Texas A&M at the end, and so that was in my mind. I
That's
don't
what
know.
you were hoping for.
We might have to edit that out because I don't know if that's what he wanted, but um, I don't really know if that's what the loss, or what was actually happening, but it certainly made it harder for him. And
Yeah.
I think most kids deal with injuries at some point, and it makes their life more difficult. And so
What did you
it's a
as a as a parent, like parenting Bowden, how like what were some of the things that you did that helped? What were some things you did that didn't help? Like, very, I guess, very specifically, like when he was dealing with this, what worked and what didn't work.
thankfully he was always highly motivated. He's very motivated. You're very motivated. We have yet to see if Torsten's very motivated. We might have to cut that out too. Um, but he was very motivated to get back, and he loved playing football so much. And I think he was so excited to get back on the field. And now I can see it. It's just so awesome to see him playing in college, and he just enjoys it so much. And it's something that both you and he have embraced, and have embraced the work of it, but also the enjoyment of it, and being a part of
Yeah.
a high level team. It's got a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so I think his goal was always to get back on the field. And as a parent, we were blessed to be part of a good football program that really nurtured his therapy and getting back, and that was incredible, actually, in retrospect, the therapy. And very thankful for the trainers at the high school, and it was a big high school with a really good athletic program. And so that was really helpful. They really wanted him back. We really kept saying, this is just a minor bump in the road. And, every time there's a setback with on any of you guys, I feel like my goal has been to focus you far enough out that you're not even worried about kind of what is being lost in the short term.
Right.
And, you know, Torsten actually broke his wrist this football season, and for a quarterback, that's pretty frustrating. And I think he's been pretty resilient with it. It's not the end of the world, and for a variety of reasons, it's not hasn't been too big of a deal. But you can let those short-term issues overwhelm you, and I think to be successful at all in sports, you need to have a longer term goal in mind, and the short term just kills you because that can go either way, depending on injuries, depending on win-loss record, depending on the coach, another teammate. There's so many variables that you can't control.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that those are all good points, and that it's just there really is so much that's out of your control, and as a pitcher, that's something that I think about all the time. Is just controlling what's in your control, what's in your domain, and everything else you just kind of let it work itself out. So yeah, I think that's really important. And Bowden's back, so he has you guys did your job, and you got him back healthy, and now he's taken off. So it's really good to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
interviewing me. I'm sure there's tons more we could get to, but we're running low on time. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of parenting is about trying to understand each kid and each athlete, and try to see what's best for them and create an environment where they can excel. And for us, it was always creating an environment. I always felt like I needed to create a highly competitive environment to keep pushing you externally, even if it was uncomfortable. So, anyways, well, thanks
Yeah.
for doing
Thanks.
this, Gunner.
Yeah. Thanks
And
for keeping me on for the first 2 episodes. It's such an honor.
we'll have to keep it going. So maybe you can help me. Maybe you can guest host with me on
Yeah, exactly. All
some
right.
other ones. All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks so much. Thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, see you on the next episode of Going D1 Real Recruiting Stories.
Awesome.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Gunner.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.